In Togo, in Côte d'Ivoire, in Gabon, in Cameroun, and even in Senegal, there's been an attempt in Senegal recently. If I'm not mistaken, I'd say this year, because the the last president, President Macky Sall, wanted to actually amend the constitution so that he will be, or he might have been in a position to run for another term. But thanks to the vigilance of, the Supreme Court magistrate of Senegal, the rule of law won again. But it's not in every African country where you have such strong individual, where you have such strong, member of the judicial system who can actually stand against, a unilateral decision coming from the most powerful person in the country when it comes to the modification of the constitution. Well, this is the next episode, following my analysis of constitutional coup. If you haven't listened to episode 39, I strongly invite you to do so before enjoying this very dynamic and very mind-blowing episode. I'm pretty sure you will learn a lot of amazing things, and most important, you will actually live here with like thousands of perspectives when it comes to, assessing the impact of constitutional coup and how serious, this can be for the upholding of democracy, within a specific country. Welcome to your favorite podcast, Smart, Intellectual, Knowledgeable African Talks. My name is S.I.K.A, and as always, I'm happy to be here with all of you. Well, the community is growing, and I invite you to continue, being a member of our community. So if you're not yet, a part of us, it's not difficult at all. All you have to do is to click on the subscribe button to activate the ring bell so that you will not miss out on any of the very interesting podcasts that I'm releasing at least every week. Well, like I was saying in my introduction, I was naming, a couple of African countries which have been, undergoing constitutional change, and the list is pretty long. The list is longer than that. You can think of countries like Côte d'Ivoire, Togo, Cameroun, and recently Gabon. There's also country like Nigeria, Burkina Faso, also Guinea, which recently, issued a draft of its new constitution, which, by the way, I already discussed in some of my episodes, so you can look through the existing and available podcast episode so that you will also listen to my analysis with regard to the newly drafted constitution of the Republic of Guinea-Conakry. So the point I want to discuss in part 2 of my analysis is to continue looking at the controversies around constitutional coups. First of all, if you remember, in the first part, I told you that it's very interesting to see how lightly constitutional coups are treated versus military coups. Perhaps one of the many reasons is because in most instances, when you're looking at all the African countries and all the countries worldwide where constitutional changes are taking place, usually it's a non-violent process. So I think this is the first key reason. One of the first key reasons why constitutional coups are not treated or not dealt with the same severity as when it comes to military coups is perhaps because of the non-violent aspect. Constitutional coups are very technical. It's a matter of the brain. When it comes to military coups, it's a matter of muscle. It's a matter of power. It's a matter of life and death. But when it comes to constitutional coups, like I said, it's very subtle. It's a very subtle process where, head of states or the head of government or even head of parliament do decide to actually trigger, a specific article within the constitution to make sure that they have the right to amend the constitution or to change a specific provision in the constitution to serve a specific purpose. Well, you will also notice that constitutional coups are also very difficult, to condemn or very difficult to actually punish in a very difficult way because the constitution itself, makes room for its own modification, its own amendment. What does it mean exactly? Well, the first element I want you to keep in mind here is to understand that amending your constitution is not illegal. That's the first aspect you should understand. Why is it not illegal? Because the constitution itself is allowing for its own modification. Therefore, you cannot or you should not view, a president, modifying the constitution as doing an illegal act. The act of amending the constitution is not illegal. What we are discussing here is the rationale, the purpose, the reason why the president or a member of the parliament or the head of the government is actually issuing such an amendment. So we should all be, on the same line here. A constitutional change is not illegal because the Constitution authorizes it. That's the first point. And how does the Constitution authorize it? Well, through specific mechanisms, such as, for instance, a referendum. The referendum simply means that once the amendment, is processing, like the next phase should be to, after following all the legal steps and all the internal steps, and one of the other steps to consider is to also bring the decision, regarding the amendment of the Constitution or a specific provision of the Constitution before the people. And it is up to the people to actually vote yes or to vote no. There are also other mechanisms through which the government can actually amend the Constitution without the intervention of the people. So I'm not going to delve into too much detail, but what I want you to keep in mind is that, first of all, the action of, amending a constitution is not illegal. So that's the very important element. And in my opinion, in addition to the fact that it is a non-violent process, but this element also, to me, is one of the reasons why it's very delicate, to reprimand a constitutional change with the same energy as a military coup. A military coup is not, forces by the law. If you take the Constitution, if you take international law, nowhere in all major laws or sectorial laws or regulation, you will see a legal text making provision for the use of force if you want to become a president or if you want to become the head of a public institution. It is written nowhere. So that's one of the reasons why military takeovers are, from the get-going viewed as something very negative because, first of all, they are illegal. There are actually breaching a legal provision. But second, most of the time when they're occurring, they are followed by death. They are followed by bloodbath and stuff like that. Innocent die and etc. But what I'm trying to discuss or to develop in this podcast is the importance, not to consider something dangerous only because it has the propensity of causing physical damage. Do you get me? Okay, let me slow down. We should not reprimand, we should not condemn something only because that something, when occurring, leads to the death of people, leads to physical destruction of private property and public property and stuff like that. we should also condemn anything that can or may be legal, but with a negative or an evil intention. So the intention also is very important. That's why in law, there's a principle called good faith. The principle of good faith, it is very difficult to prove, because it's subtle, it's very subjective. Like, how do you prove that I, Philip S.I.K.A, I am making this episode in good faith? Perhaps I'm making this episode because I'm trying to serve, the purpose of a political party, or I'm trying to serve the purpose of a specific president. Who knows? So how can you assess whether or not I'm making this episode in good faith? It's very difficult, but because it's difficult to prove doesn't mean it's not relevant. It's relevant, and sometimes we should pause and also look at the intention. Why are people doing what they're doing? Why are people triggering a legal process, even though it's legal or even though it's within the right to do so? So I hope you understand, this very first part, of my second analysis. So overall, constitutional change are actually legal because the constitution makes room for it. But in the African context, like I said in the previous episode, we will see that unfortunately, it's not happening because of, public interest, or because the incumbent president or the incumbent leaders, are trying to improve the social, economic, and financial, landscape. The modification generally manifests in two ways, as you'll see. The first is because they want to alter the duration of term limits by increasing or decreasing the number of years. Let me give you a specific example. Sometimes the Constitution may say that the Constitution, as I was saying, may actually make room for a 5-year term, which means that when you get elected, you have 5 years to run the country. And the incumbent president or the authorities, authorized by the Constitution to actually amend the Constitution following a specific process, can actually decide to decrease that term or to increase it. And for instance, in America, the term was 5 years, and it was decreased to 4 years. In Gabon, it used to be 7 years, and it went to 5 years. So you have actually, scenario where the president or the authorities may actually decide to reduce it. But again, what's the objective? What are the reasons? Why are we going from 7 to 5 in Gabon? That's the first question that we should ask. Will this benefit the people? Will this benefit the country? Will this have a direct or an indirect positive, effect on the country's stability? And this is very important. Remember again, because something is legal does not mean we should not question the rationale. Now, the second form, sometimes, is the complete removal of term or age limits, And this is actually done for a specific reason, because sometimes you'll notice that in some African countries, the incumbent president or the current leaders, they are actually old. They're growing older. They are over 70. And if there is a term limit in the Constitution, let's say, for instance, the maximum age for a candidate, should be 60 or 65. And now the incumbent president is about to turn over 65 by the next election period. Well, what they do often is to remove that term limit completely so that there's no limit, like in Cameroun, or what they do is to increase it like they did in Côte d'Ivoire. But again, we should always question the rationale here. Why are they doing so? Sometimes it's to serve their personal interests. So most of the time, it is actually to serve their personal interest because they want to remain in power and they want to be able to run legally speaking. But some other time, they already know that they do qualify, but they're also trying to do that because they want to eliminate, a specific candidate within the opposition. So it's very important to understand either way, the constitution changes always serves, or in majority of the cases, it serves, the interest of the incumbent president or the incumbent leaders. And another very interesting and relevant aspect is that often, it precedes the invocation of the principle of non-retroactivity of the new law, which means the current president or the current leader will be able to run, during the coming election period, which means that if by the time I, Philippe, I'm running my second and last term according to the constitution of Zamunda, Zamunda is an imaginary country. So I'm going to put ourselves within that fiction. I'm the president of Zamunda, okay? And according to the constitution of Zamunda, I am to make only 2 terms of 5 years each. And during my second terms, I decide to change the constitution because I want to run a 3rd term. Well, according to people, you will say that I'm running a 3rd term, but if I modify the constitution and if I do trigger the principle of non-retroactivity, then you will not be able to count my previous, running as part of the term limit, but like my previous term will be completely deleted. So I'm going to be able now to run for office, for a 3rd term according to the general opinion, but according to the law, I will be running for the 1st term within the new constitution. So this is the very important and the very small nuance we should keep in mind. Let me know what you think about this episode. Let me know what you think about this analysis. I hope you enjoy it. I did enjoy it, and I hope it provided you with mind-blowing information and powerful perspectives. Thank you for listening to your favorite podcast, Smart, Intellectual, Knowledgeable African Talks, the only podcast where strong ideas meet powerful perspectives. À bientôt.